Hi, I'm delighted to be here with Donna Herbert. Donna, you've had a fascinating life journey. I want to talk a little bit today about organisations, organisational development, change, people in the workplace, redundancy, change, and the turmoil that people often go through during their organisational life, often unnecessarily, and perhaps to distill some best practice for leaders and staff going through the whole thing about organisational life. After all, we spend so much of our lives there. For those people who don't know you, your background is that you've got two very interesting hats. Today you're an executive coach, you're a change management specialist. Your background before that, you were a high-flying HR director, including working in places like Chumford. So you've seen this from both sides, haven't you? I want to kind of kick off by asking you, why is it that you feel that this area, organisations change, people in organisations, is such a fraught one when we all know and we all hear that the best, our greatest asset is our people? Why has it become so fraught and so difficult, do you think?
That's a really interesting question. I think change is difficult for everybody, and I think as human beings we tend to like certainty and we like status quo. So anything that upsets that natural rhythm of things is quite difficult for people. I think in organisations, certainly, one of the things that was consistent across my career is that people find it really hard to have difficult conversations, or conversations that they perceive are going to be difficult, whether they're upsetting or whether they're delivering slightly difficult news or things that individual's not particularly comfortable talking about. And I think communication is absolutely critical in helping change that properly, in that, you know, most people, the fear of the unknown is worse than actually facing what it is that needs to happen.
I think what you're saying already is very powerful, because as you were saying that about having difficult conversations and about change, I guess you're absolutely right. I guess organisations need to go through change because the economy's changed, what customers will need will change, what the country or the world needs may will change, what industries need to change. And I love the fact that you talked about the communications very, very, very early on, and that people often have difficulty during those difficult conversations. One of the things that struck me, when my first background was in media and PR, is that one of the first things is the organisation first of all communicating. Does it have a clear vision? Is it telling people what's going on? Does it know what's going on? Is it articulating that? And then when change happens, are the managers able or armed to do all of that kind of stuff?
And I think it's also about people having context, because if an organisation has a clear strategy and a clear sense of, right, this is where we're heading, you know, people can take difficult news, they just want to understand the context. And I think in the absence of that context, people make stuff up for themselves. And actually, what they imagine is usually 10 times worse than the reality. And you know, it's quite interesting when you start to observe these urban myths that get created. And I think the other thing is that leaders don't really realise, and I certainly didn't, the extent to which people look at you and look at your behaviour for clues, and things that you either consciously or subconsciously are doing send out signals, and if those signals are in conflict with what people are thinking is likely to happen, so they're putting 2 and 2 together and making 5, they will interpret your behaviour as if it's supporting that thing.
So there's a number of things going on here, isn't there? There's a lot going on here. There's the clarity, there's the vision, whatever's going on, there's a communicator here. But then are people aligned and in line with, and their behaviours in line with what's going on? And this brings to my mind, okay, how armed and able is everybody within that kind of context? I wonder, could you tell me a little bit about, and for viewers who are watching this, tell us a little bit about your background. How did your career unfold, and how did you get to the dizzy heights of being a HR director? Tell us just in a minute or so a bit about your journey.
Actually, it was by accident. I got to university. I'd always wanted to study languages. Got to the end of it, thought I have no idea what I wanted to do. But a brilliant career advisor talked to me about my skills, my strengths, and suggested doing a postgrad qualification and specialising in HR, which is what I did. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. So I worked my way through the ranks, ended up running HR for Walt Disney International. And then
as one does. Well, for lots of people then, I'm going to push you there on that moment then. I mean, was that, because I guess one of the things, and I think it's relevant for this conversation, isn't it, organisational progression. What helped you to blossom? I mean, so many people would love to work or work for an organisation like Disney, you found yourself then on that kind of career trajectory and then having a senior post. What helped you? Were you mentored? Were you supported? Tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, I had a great mentor.
Right.
Certainly, there's one person that springs to mind who developed me to be her successor.
Right.
He was massively inspirational.
Right. What was their role at the time? What was your
She
role
was
at the
my
time?
boss
Right.
at the time.
Right. And what was her title? What was your role?
I was, I can't remember, I think I was an HR manager
Right.
at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
And she was the HR director
Right.
of a division.
Yeah.
And she developed me and just gave me more and more responsibility and trusted me and empowered me and really was there to support me. And I
Right.
think that whole sense that she used to joke that I was nipping at her heels and if
Yeah.
I didn't calm down she'd have nothing to do. But in a very supportive way. And I think having that person that believes in you and believes in your talent and your capability is massively
It is,
important.
isn't it? And I think what I like about that, I think it's worth pausing on your career journey there because that's our first starting point, isn't it? We find ourselves after school or after university, whatever, in the workplace. Most people still going to the workplace. And then I guess depending how they're supported and nurtured is going to depend how things unfold. You had a very good positive experience there. Looking back from the experience you then had, then being a HR director and achieving the things you want, what's key at those early stages when people are first brought on board organisation from your experience as a HR director and as a coach? What's key?
Curiosity.
Right.
For me is the start and end of it all. I think asking lots of questions.
Right. So for me as a staff member, as me as going into an organisation, I need to be curious, I need to be energised.
Yeah, exactly. Love the business that you're going into. Do something that you really can identify with. Ask lots of questions, build great relationships. Most businesses are relationship driven, and actually the way that you get success is to, and I don't mean that in a superficial way, but building great relationships with people.
And what should the organisations be doing? So I'm as an individual, like yourself, I'm going in there, I'm energised, I learn, I'm curious, and I give my all and I build the relationships with the team, with the staff and so on. What should organisations be doing? Because I guess that so many organisations often do that wrong. And my very first experience in the workplace was similar in that I had, well, first of all, I think I had a great induction. It was great. I actually knew the organisation, what they were about. I had a supportive first few managers and so on. And I realised my own responsibility, though I was even just 18, to work hard. But what should organisations be doing? Because so many people might be watching this thinking, you know what, I wish I had that experience, Diane, because mine was awful. Nobody told me who anybody was, and they just left me there and they just gave me a pack and off you go.
And that does happen. I mean, I think fundamentally we are all responsible for our own learning. And yes, a brilliant organisation will have a mentorship programme or it'll have a great induction, and it will develop talent and really nurture people to be the best versions of themselves. But in the absence of that, I think you take responsibility and you say, okay, I'm going to go and find out what am I really interested in, where does my passion lie, who can I go and talk to about it. In my experience, when you go up to somebody and say, would you have a cup of coffee with me, I'd love to find out more about what you do, I don't think anybody's ever said no to me. People love to talk about what they do, and they love people reaching out to them.
And were you employing those techniques even very early on in your career when you graduated and when you found your work? Had you either through your own wherewithal or through the support and mentoring, were you doing stuff like that? Was that something learned later?
No, it was a bit of both. I think because I've got natural curiosity, I was doing it anyway because I'm just quite nosy. I want to find out what's happening. I think now I can post-rationalise it and say it was about building the relationships and it was about finding out for myself how things worked. It wasn't quite as deliberate or planned as it sounds, and I think that's one of the things that you learn with experience. And certainly that I pass on to people is that whole sense of, a lot of people are worried about, what will they think of me, perhaps it's a stupid question, or, who am I, they're not going to be interested in talking to me. That's complete and utter rubbish. People can say no if they don't, or they can say, I don't have time. 9.5 times out of 10 they won't, they won't be pleased to. And actually just have the courage of your convictions and ask the question.
I want to ask a little bit about the managers thing, because what's great in your case is that you you're curious, you worked hard clearly, your boss clearly recognised that you had the talent, supported you, and recognised that you could advance and that you wanted to progress in your particular career. And I guess that's one thing, isn't it? To articulate to your bosses if they feel where you're wanting to go in your career. What is it that a good, diligent manager should be doing when it comes to developing their talent and the talent of their staff? Because I guess some managers get it.
Yeah.
Your manager there absolutely got it, was very keen, she could see where you were going and the potential. But many managers, I guess being a mentor or coaching is maybe something outside their skill set. Maybe they just had a technical skill beforehand. Any general tips for that? I know it's very, very broad and it will depend on the individual, but any general tips for the manager in terms of how is it you develop a young Diane, a young Rasheed, a young Steve, a young Michelle when they're starting early on in their career, especially if they're nervous perhaps about time or other people thinking, am I favouritising one member of staff? General tips there.
I mean, there's a couple of things that springs to mind. I mean, most organisations have performance reviews and appraisals. Right. I think the best way to use that time is to focus on the individual's development. So having a conversation about what are your hopes and dreams for the future, what would you really like to do if you think about yourself 5-10 years in the future, what's your ideal career, where would you like to see yourself? And talk to the individual and ask them what it is that they would like to do. And then I think the other thing is thinking about what is that person's particular strengths profile, and you don't need fancy tools to do that. But if I think about what they're doing when they're at their best, what is it that they do really well?
I think that you mentioned something so key here, because I think that just you brought back to me a key point in my career. I can remember very, very clearly, I think my second and a half boss, who I jokingly say, in many ways he was lazy. However, one of the things, if he's watching this, he's going to say tell me off. But one of the things he was great at doing, and I really applaud him because it's a key factor in my career, what he did recognise that one of the things that I loved to do is that I worked in media and PR, I worked in the media and PR team. I loved the bit that had to do with media training. He made me responsible for the media training programme, and that made me flourish. It was a birthplace, probably in a way, of the work that I do today as a coach. So I think this thing about finding out what is it they're good at, what are the things that they really enjoy, what are their strengths, how can we play to their strengths is so important. Ask them.
You know, simple questions like, when you're firing on all cylinders, what is it that you're doing? You know, what are the things that you think, you know, I'm going to jump out of bed to do those? And what are the things that you think, and we've all got them, and every job has them.
And I guess for the manager not to be afraid of that because of all the areas of the job that then you can help them that they still need to do, but there might be other areas where you realise you're great with people, well, hey, why not be involved in this part or that part or what have you? I think it's such, like, what I love about that as often is that it's the kind of simple advice but very powerful and very, very profound. I'm going to pause the camera there. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about then change, because you highlighted that early on, and I guess that hopefully if all things are in a good situation, organisations and individuals should be doing some of the things that we've touched on already, communicating, us giving our best, putting the best, and then using things like performance to move forward. I want to talk about when it all goes, more challenge. More challenge. So I'm going to pause the camera there, and we'll come back.